Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on religious trauma. My name is Angel DeSantis. Thank you for being here with me. Please click like and subscribe. This week I want to talk about some inner child work. And if you've never done inner child work before, don't worry about it. We're not going to go into a huge session. But I do want to invite you, as your adult self now, as however old you are, to think about your view of yourself as a child. Because a lot of times, or sometimes, the view that we have of ourselves as a child is not actually our view. It's more remembering the voices about what we heard about ourselves as a child. And where this is most common, I think, is in a curious child, somebody who's really rambunctious, somebody who was really curious and really enjoyed life. And because the abusive religious environment is that of suppression and oppression, if you were a really lively, vibrant child, you will have heard a lot of really nasty, negative things about yourself. And sometimes that can get stuck and it can stay with you all the way into adulthood. So the adult you still believes those things that you heard about yourself as a child. That you're nasty, that you have a hard time concentrating, that you're useless, that you're foolish, all those things that you heard that don't actually say anything about you. They say something about the environment you were in when you heard them. So it's really important as a really big piece of your healing of yourself when you're coming out of something that is religiously abusive. It's really important to understand that the things that you heard about yourself as a child and the way that you were treated as a child said nothing about your actual worth as a child. It doesn't say anything about you. It says something about the environment that you were in. So if the environment that you were in needed obedience and needed no questions and needed a servant, and you weren't those things, then you will have heard terrible things about yourself. So I think that I'm going to ask you to do a little practice. You don't have to do it, but I'm just going to invite you to do it because I think it's really important to see yourself as you were, as a younger version of yourself, and see all the good parts of yourself. Because if you grew up in a religiously oppressive environment, a religiously abusive environment, you will have only heard nasty things about yourself for a good number of years. And you might still believe them if you never took the time to pause and kind of reflect and think, where did those come from? Why is the voice in my head so mean to me? And it might be because of that. It might be because you heard so many bad things about yourself as a child that you believed them because there was kind of no other excuse for the way that you were treated. I was treated really badly as a child. And because you can't escape the situation, you have to rationalize it. So the way that I rationalized it was, well, maybe I'm being treated really badly because I'm a really bad human being. And that seemed to be an easy explanation. So I kept that with me for a really long time until I started doing this sort of work and just kind of really thinking about things and putting myself back into situations that I was in. If you hear sirens, it's because I'm in Los Angeles and there are always sirens. But putting myself back into those situations and thinking, did I deserve that punishment? Was I actually a bad child? Or was I a good child in a bad environment? And it's important for you to understand the picture, being far enough away from it to look back now without the kind of mess of being so close to the trees. Because at the time that you're told this stuff, you can't escape your situation. You need an explanation for how you're being treated, and you don't have the cognitive ability to know otherwise. But now that you're far enough away from it, it's important to look back with all your facilities now and maybe change your view of yourself a little bit. And that might help with any issues that you maybe currently have, where you might suffer from low self-esteem, or you might still feel incapable, or you might still feel intrinsically flawed somehow, and you're not quite sure where that came from. It's just kind of something you carry with you. And it could be because you haven't gone back and spent some time with that younger version of yourself and been like, hey, you weren't a bad kid. You were great. You were a great, curious kid. You asked a lot of questions and you didn't deserve what happened to you. So I really invite you to look back and look at yourself as a child and wonder why you have the view of yourself that you do. And there's another reason for this, and now I'm going to kind of steer off that way. There's a reason that abuse is cyclical. And it's because if you were beaten as a child, and I'll just use my case, I sent my sister across the street to buy some gum, and it was found out that I did that. So I was beaten with a wire hanger to the point that my skin broke because it like welted up and bled. And I always thought I deserved that. I always thought, well, yeah, the punishment fit the crime, because I sent my sister across the street. I watched her from like a window, and I watched her go to Lawson's and come back. Lawson's is a store in Japan. And she came back with gum, and then we like tried to eat it, and we got caught. She outed me. I got a beating. And I had always been thinking that, yes, I deserved that, because that is what I had heard at the time. I was 11 years old at the time, and I had been told that I should have known better. I was supposed to be a leader at that time. I was leading the flock astray. I deserved even more beatings than what I got. I think I got 6 swats with the wire hanger, and I was told that I deserved much more than that. And so I thought that that was something gracious that had happened to me. Like, I was like, wow, you know, the person who gave me this beating like was so nice to me. And that was the understanding that I had of the situation. And I thought that the punishment fit the crime. And how that might have played out if I had kids before healing myself is, if my child had done something, I would, if I still thought that the punishment fit the crime, I would have recreated that. I would have thought, well, what punishment did I get? And then I would have punished the child. And maybe I would have been the person that told my kid, like, well, when I was your age, I got 12 and I'm only going to give you 4. So that makes me feel good. But the point of all of that is that's still a terrible thing to do. But if I haven't worked through my own view of myself as a child, and I haven't worked through my own like reactions and understanding of punishment, then I won't even think of it. If I've never addressed it, I'll just continue the cycle because it's what I know and it still makes sense to me. But when I'm able to pause, to not have children, to kind of sort through my own stuff and understand it better, now I'm super thankful that I am able to see what actually happened, to understand that there was kind of nothing that I could have done that would have deserved me being beaten with a wire hanger so much that I bled from my welts. There was nothing. And that just spoke to the environment that I was in. I was beaten because I was in a bad environment with people that thought it was okay for adults to beat children. That's why that happened to me. It wasn't because I sent my sister across the street for gum. It could have been anything. It could have been I had a bad attitude. It could have been I wasn't smiling. They would have picked anything. But that punishment doesn't fit whatever crime. So it's important for you to travel back to these younger versions of yourself and to understand what you still believe about that younger version of you so that you can sort it out, move past it, and start to end that cycle of abuse that continues when these things are not looked at. So this is like deep work, but my main thing that I wanted to get across to you is that it's important for you to view yourself well. And if your view of yourself has a lot based off of what you heard about yourself when you were in a bad environment, then yeah, you'll have a bad view of yourself because you are still believing things about yourself that you heard about yourself when you were in a terrible environment. And now that you're no longer in a terrible environment, what have you heard? And it's very likely that you have heard positive things once you are no longer in a bad environment. But somehow, because they are new, we're less likely to believe them. We think, well, these people just don't understand how we actually are, or if they only knew how bad I really was, or what a bad kid I was, or the bad things I've done. And we don't take this new information, this positive information, which is true about ourselves. We don't take that into consideration. We still believe the things that we heard about ourselves when we were in a bad environment. So it's important for you to think about the younger versions of yourself and really wonder where your opinions come from. Do they even belong to you? Or is there new evidence that you have now that you're in a better environment that you can take into consideration about yourself? And can you change what you believed about yourself when you were a child? Because if you still believe that you were a bad kid, then it just might mean that you might not have done this sort of work before, but it's very likely that you were an amazing kid in a bad environment. So that's my video this week. I don't want to give you a task, except for maybe go to therapy, except to like go for a long walk and think about it. Think about yourself as a child and wonder where your opinions come from, and let yourself start to believe positive things about yourself. Let yourself start to believe the new evidence that you've heard, that you're kind and compassionate, the new evidence that shows up when you're not in a bad environment. So, congratulations to you if you have been able to change your environment. It's not an easy thing to do. But now start to believe that. Start to believe what you hear about yourself once you're in a good environment. So that is my video this week. As usual, I hope that it helps. Please share it with whoever you think it would be useful to share it with. And dive into the comments. I do try and respond. And I do my best. And thank you for being here. Thank you for watching all the way through. Hope that it's useful. Let me know what you find, and I'll see you next week.